Most people last 14 to 17 days with that kind of resolute willpower, but without usually community, without connection, without practical tools. So I think that's one thing I did early on was think, how can I create a lifestyle that's actually sustainable? Because I can do Whole30, I can take breaks, I can do a juice cleanse, I can do all that. That's not creating a lifestyle that is checking boxes. I want a lifestyle.
Hey everybody, welcome to Sober Strength. I'm your host, Jesse Karajat. Thank you for being here. We've got a great conversation here in January for you. Topics that I'm just really excited to talk about. One of them is sober-mindedness. What does it mean? What is sobriety or sober? What is it not? And how to live a life that is awakened, alert, aware, and present. And we'll go into that in the episode. And then the other topic is faith. What role can faith play, not only in our mental health, emotional health, and physical health, but also just in general in life? And I think the guest that's here with me today to talk about this is amazing. Her name is Jenn. She goes by Sober Sis. That's Sober Minded Sisterhood is her organization. She is an author, a speaker, a coach, and she's just got tons and tons of wisdom. Get a notebook, get your phone out, get ready to jot down just some things that she shares and just some quotable quotes that will stick with you. So with that, let's dive into this week's episode with Jenn, aka Sober Sis. Let's go deep. Jenn, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
I just said to Jenn offline, I said, I love your sweater. And she said, there's a long story. And she doesn't know that I'm going to start this podcast by asking, tell us about the sweater.
I love it. I love it. There is a great story. So I have a daughter in her mid-20s that lives in cool Austin. She lives on South Congress, and there's a huge thrift market that goes on South Congress. It's probably, for all I know, it's every weekend or at least once a month with all these tents and all these thrift vendors and everything. And so we saw this sweater, and it's basically just like a sweater that somebody just bought and just put every patch in the world that they thought was cool onto one sweater with no rhyme or reason. And I fell in love with it. And she was like, Mom, I'm going to buy it for you. So I'm wearing my $10 thrift sweater from a South Congress outdoor thrift fair.
Very cool. Everyone else is wearing ugly sweaters, ugly Christmas sweaters from Target, and you're wearing an authentic thrift.
Trust me, it's one of a kind.
I love it. I love it. So let's jump right in. So Sober Sis, right? You're a very popular, important content creator in that kind of sobriety, mental health, sober curious space. But leading up to this interview, one of the things you said to me was, and I think this is a quote, I don't identify with sober. Tell me about that. What do you identify with? And let's get into what sober-mindedness is, maybe compared to sober.
Yes, I was just literally talking to our sober-minded sisterhood, which is really what Sober Sis is short for. If you follow me on Instagram at Sober Sis, one word, it's really short for sober-minded sisterhood, but that's a mouthful. That's a lot. And so, Jesse, I love that we're starting with this because I do think, and again, if anyone out there is listening and really identifies or resonates with the word sober or sobriety, good for you. I'm here for whatever works for you. For me, the word sober, and again, it's a little bit sad and true in our culture, in our society, that there's a bit of a stigma to the word sober. Just like there's a stigma to the word addict, alcoholic, I believe there's a stigma still to the word sober. And so I'm not trying to increase that stigma. If anything, I'm trying to talk about it and bring it out into a lot of different lights in a lot of different facets. Picture a diamond. You're going to see a lot of different angles with the different cuts and the way you're looking at it. So again, I am a quote sober person in the sense that I don't drink alcohol anymore. But in my humble opinion, when I say sober, it feels loaded. And it could be my background, the way I grew up, or just I found that many others do feel this way as well. If they're in the what I would call the gray area of drinking. I don't know if your listeners are familiar with that term, but gray area drinking and people who are, quote, sober curious to go sober or be sober just out in the wild. Like if I were to say, yeah, I've been sober for almost 8 years. I personally really resonate with, I've been choosing, because it is 100% a choice, to live an alcohol-free lifestyle for the past 8 years. And what's more important to me than abstinence is presence. That's what I really focus on with being sober-minded. It's less about what I'm not doing and more about what it is I am doing, what I am pursuing, how I am showing up, than what I'm abstaining from, which the word sober could include, drugs, alcohol, a host of things. But to be sober-minded includes all the things as well that you're awake to, that you're alive to, that you're alert to in your own life. So that's kind of my working definition of being sober-minded, is to be awake, alert, aware, and present in your own life. And I have found that alcohol does not help me do that. I cannot retain and sustain my sober mind if I have an altered mind. So I want to renew my mind. I want to have a sober mind. And so that's why for me, as AKA Sober Sis, again, I'm a part of the sober community, a part of the sober movement. But I do think that I want to bring in some different language that maybe resonates with a different group of people that may be more open to learning and growing in their changing their relationship with alcohol if they had some different semantics.
Yeah, I love that. Awake, alert, aware, and present. That is, man, that is the pursuit. That is the pursuit of life. And on that note, something that you and I have in common, and we acknowledge this leading up to this interview, is that I also have been seeking through the Sober Strength podcast and just everything that I'm doing to broaden that term, because it's historically inaccurate to just solely attach alcohol to the word sober in the first place.
Right.
Sober kind of people latched onto that term during like the AA kind of startup in even like the 1940s and 1950s. To me, it's a much more worthy, important pursuit to pursue what you're speaking to, sober-mindedness, because yes, alcohol can be one such thing that prevents us from being awake, alert, aware, and present. But guess what? So can Instagram. Right. And
exactly right.
So can, binging whatever, Game of Thrones, which I still, as a badge of honor, I just haven't watched it. I try to resist what people are just crazy about.
But vices.
Yeah, but hopefully my point's taken.
The ways to numb out, the ways to eject, alter reality, or just lose that alertness to what's going on.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think it's important. But I will say, there are people, and this has always been fascinating to me, with like that label of sober being specifically alcohol. It always kind of just didn't sit right with me that you would put a label on yourself because of something that you're not part of.
That resonates with me as well. I identify, I want to be, I resonate with being sober-minded because that is my pursuit. That is my goal. So my mind, I say in my book, Look Alive Sis, I had more of a thinking problem than I did a drinking problem. And it's absolutely true, because when I changed my thinking, my actual mind went from a divided mind. I'm trying to chase two rabbits. I can't catch either one. I'm in the detox-to-retox loop. I am detoxing by day with my green juice and my yoga and my kale salad and all. I mean, I'm doing it all. The quote right thing, super healthy, super mindful, very sober minded by day. In fact, almost trying to balance out that evening of just kind of that numbing out in front of the TV, drinking while I'm cooking, book club, date night, socializing, where I knew I was going to, quote, retox. So I went from a divided mind to then renewing my mind, getting the truth in there. My belief system changed. I believed alcohol was doing these things for me. Turns out that's not true. And when you realize that, it's like, oh, okay. So I went from really having a very divided mind to almost like compartmentalized, healthy girl by day, mindful mom, doing all the things, to me time, my reward, kind of checking out, because I mean, I've checked all the boxes. And so then to go from a renewed mind, renewing my mind, gave me the sober mind that I was looking for.
Hey, it's Jesse, and if you've been following this show, then you know I've had my fair share of struggles with alcohol over the years. You also know that I built a pretty solid toolkit to help maintain a healthy relationship with alcohol. Things like fitness, mindfulness, accountability groups, and technology. All great, all helpful, but there's one tool I've recently found that blew my mind, and I can't believe it took me so long to discover it. It's called naltrexone, an FDA-approved, science-backed, and affordable medication that helps reduce cravings and control drinking. The first time I took it, I'll never forget, I was skeptical and not completely buying into the idea that a medication can help me with drinking. But just after a few days, I could not believe how effective it was in eliminating all of my cravings for alcohol. It needs to be more better known. And that is where Or Health comes in. And I'm honored to have them as a sponsor of the show. You can have doctor-prescribed naltrexone shipped discreetly and directly to your door. No pharmacies, no doctor's offices, just the help you need. It's online, it's private, and it's judgment-free. And most importantly, it works. As of today, over 35,000 Or members have been treated, and 76% of respondents report drinking less in just 2 short weeks. So here's how to get started. Text STRENGTH to 710-710. That's STRENGTH to 710-710. You'll take a quick, discreet survey, and they'll guide you through the entire process of trying naltrexone for the first time. It's easy, straightforward, and honestly, might be the best move you make for yourself today. So if you're ready to take a massive step forward in controlling your alcohol intake, text STRENGTH to 710-710 and let Or Health help you redefine your relationship with alcohol. And so you don't drink at all now, right, Jen?
I don't drink at all now.
At all. When did this pivot happen for you?
It was April of 2017. I was in my mid-40s at the time, right before I turned 46. My oldest, we have 2 kids. Like I mentioned, my daughter earlier, now they're both in their mid-20s. At that time, they were kind of late teenage years. And quite honestly, I was watching them about to fly the nest. They were getting to literally go reinvent themselves and go into a new chapter in life, a new season in life. And that for me was a real big catalyst. 40 to 45 for me were some of the more difficult years of my life. In marriage, in parenting, I just felt lost. It's like my identity became my roles and all the different hats I was wearing. And I was trying to be really good at each one, but it was, again, very compartmentalized. And I really, Jesse, I kind of lost myself. I've just about worked myself out of a job. I was a stay-at-home mom that had little side entrepreneur businesses, but was really able to stay home and raise my kids. Well, they were raised, they were going. And so I think a lot of what was a pivotal point for me was I wanted to show up at 50, which seemed like a ways away at that time. I wanted to show up at 50 different than I did 40. I had gotten, like I said, kind of lost in my own life. I was playing small. What that means to me is I wasn't showing up with my voice as if it mattered. And I think that's why so much of sober-mindedness means something to me, because I think it's so easy. Sometimes as a mom, especially, we can get so lost in our role that we just think, oh, my opinion doesn't really matter. They're going to blow me off anyway. We minimize our presence. And I think we need to maximize our presence. whoever we are, wherever we are, that we matter. Our voice matters. Our physical, mental, emotional presence matters. That's what people want from us, with us in our relationships. They don't care if you've got a clean house. My husband doesn't care if he comes home and there's even a great meal, which there's not. But he'd rather have my heart than what my performance can do. And so I was just losing that sense of presence, and I was checking all the boxes. I was performing well. I was getting stuff done, but I was minimizing my own presence, my own voice, my own ness. And so I wanted to change that. So I wanted to show up at 50, different than I did 40. If I'm ever going to, quote, reinvent myself or show up more my true self, now's a good time, because I can see that I'm at an inflection point. I'm at a pivot point for me. I knew instinctively almost that if I could change my relationship with drinking, because it had become such an autopilot part of my life, it was such the one thing that just didn't match. There was Jenn, the wife, the mom, the Christian, the friend, the workout queen, the green juicer, and she sure does love her Pinot Grigio. Or it just had become such an expected part of every aspect of my life, because all my friends drink, my husband drinks, everybody, everything. It just felt like I wanted something different. And I knew if I could change my own personal relationship with drinking, that wine o'clock bewitching hour where I would open a bottle just to have a glass when I said I wasn't going to drink that night, and then I would just have one. Yeah, no. When you have one, you want two. At least I did. And that's the nature of alcohol itself. It creates a thirst for itself. I didn't get that memo. I just thought it was me. Weak willpower. I just need to try harder. So all my trying harder had gotten me nowhere. So I began to really look into the science behind alcohol. I started hearing people now like myself using different words. I started hearing words like alcohol-free lifestyle, sober curious, gray area drinking. I, just having a faith background, sober mind came to mind instantly, because I was like, maybe that's what it means. Maybe that's what it means in scripture when it says sober minded. Maybe it's not about one thing, abstinence. Maybe it's not about not doing one thing. Maybe it's about all the things you can and should be doing if you're awake, alert, aware, and present in your own life. And that's when I realized that needs to become my pursuit, is not just not drinking. That's too small. There's got to be something bigger. I wanted to be free from that desire and managing that aspect of my life with constant moderation and management, which I could do. In fact, in my 21-day reset challenge, I say that I have a whole day on moderation. And I say, is moderation possible? Absolutely. Until it's not. It wasn't working for me, wasn't serving me. So it's been 8 years since that time in my life where I was truly at a pivot point. Once that domino fell, it hit another one, that hit another one, that hit another one. I started sleeping better. I started having more energy. My performance wasn't just external. My changes were happening internal, because that's where my battle was. It was all inside. And so that's where I had to get the work done.
So relatable, first. And then second, I don't know if this will be episode, 58, 59, 60, somewhere in there. I've talked to a lot of people on this topic. And I have to say that visualization, or that idea of alcohol was the outlier. And then even what you just said there, it was the first domino to fall. But that idea of it's the outlier, I think that's really good for people to think about that, especially, and this is where I said relatable, this is where I can relate with. I thought that, we'll call it like the worst season of my drinking when I was 19 years old. My father had just passed away. I was kind of a loose cannon teenager out there drinking, nobody keeping an eye on me, getting in trouble. And that was just where I was just kind of like seeking chaos, or just, whatever. It was more like, the euphoria and the thrill of drinking. I thought it was like, that would be the end of it. But for me, where alcohol creeped back in was actually in my later 30s. So I'm 40, by the way. But what I experienced, and this is where it's relatable for me, it sounds like you, I was keeping it all together. I was, my career was advancing, buying a house, getting married, having not one kid, but two, but three. So what my life looked like was, I'd wake up at 5 o'clock. I'd be deadlifting by 5:30, like getting a crazy awesome workout, planning the day, checking emails, getting the kids where they need to go, being a loving, supportive husband, diving into work, excelling, leading. And I would string together like a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But by the time Friday rolled around, because I was putting so much effort and energy and I cared so much about my career and being a perfect dad and husband, like it felt like 5 straight days of just like controlling everything and like just seeking and pursuing what the habit that was ingrained in me was like, okay, it's Friday night and now it's time to just disconnect, because I was so like just wired so tight from trying to like check all these boxes, right? So similar to you, like it's like that IPA, like, next thing you know, when I'm at the liquor store, I'm just not choosing the one that tastes good. I'm choosing the one with the highest ABV. And then it goes from 1 to 2 to 3. And then it's not just Friday and Saturday, it creeps in. And then next thing you know, you're dependent on that cycle. And did you say earlier, detox to retox? Does that mean like I drank too much, I'm going to get healthy, and then I'm going to do it again?
Yeah.
Is that kind of what,
yeah.
I love that.
Literally like, how can I, because I very similar to you, would wake up, ready to slay the day, killing it. Now, I may not make the early morning workout like you did. Way to go on that. I was more like, well, I could go to the 8 a.m. yoga class, but I think I'll swing in the 9. And literally sweat it out. And again, it wasn't like I was swinging off the chandeliers here at the house or crazy mom. It was very subtle. I felt it was subtle. I think now looking back as becoming a non-drinker again, because I didn't start drinking really until my young 30s. I don't have a drinking background in my teenage years or my 20s. I missed that altogether because I was so responsible. But that also created a little bit of a naive view of drinking, because I didn't really grow up with any kind of cautionary tale around me. That was the stereotype of people, right, that had a drinking problem were the end of the line. I just didn't see anyone really wrestling with this out loud. It was almost like, if you're wrestling with drinking, you can't hide it anymore. And I could hide it all day long because it wasn't so visible. I was just drinking like all of my friends.
I think an important message from this, right? It's like, what's the statistic now? 1 in 10 people in America suffers from alcohol use disorder, right?
Yeah.
The characterization or the stigma of like the person who's an alcoholic that like drives their car off the side of the road or gets a DUI, or the one on the side of the road that's homeless. That's probably like what, 1 in 10,000 Americans, 1 in 20,000.
Yeah, I do. I picture like a bell curve where anybody that drinks at all is on the drinking spectrum. If that's somebody that just gives a toast at a wedding once a year, I mean, you're on the drinking spectrum. You just may be like a 1 over there. Again, not to label with numbers, but let's say that most people are more habitual drinkers than truly take it or leave it. And again, there are take it or leave it drinkers, and they're on the drinking spectrum. They're just not in that place where their alcohol use has those key markers of any kind of disordered drinking or a dependency. It is truly a take it or leave it. And then I think the stats are there are about 10% of, like you said, people on the alcohol use disorder drinking spectrum who would fall into that physical addictive category, where now it does become maybe a medical issue, or you do need a rehab program or some place where it's medically difficult to stop. It could be very dangerous to instantly stop. I think most are in the middle. They're your social drinkers, your habitual drinkers, people stuck in the detox to retox loop. They're not waking up and necessarily drinking, but they're sure waiting until 5 o'clock. And then they start it all over again.
Yeah. My grandpa Joe Cox, Irish, he used to say it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Yeah, and that would justify his cracking of the old, in his case, Miller Lite. I find it interesting that you made your decision when you did, when your kids were older, because for me, like I'm in a completely wild season right now. I have a 6, a 4, and a 2-year-old, and the 2-year-old's a boy, and I don't know what that means to you, but I'm learning that boys are different than girls. And yeah, I went to Chipotle today and gave him a cup of water without a lid on it. Rookie move. I turn around, he just dumps it over his head in the middle of Chipotle.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's the stress I'm dealing with.
Yeah,
but,
that's intense. That's intense.
Yeah, it can be, and I'd say that to any parents listening, it's like, give yourself some grace. Parenting is hard, and I found that when I hit my kind of second season where I was a problem drinker, it wasn't just my career. It was because of the age of my kids and the loudness and the intensity and the constant need to be on. And I think something people don't talk about enough, because I think there's a level of vulnerability that it takes, is that like having young kids or a lot of kids or a busy household can be something that drives people to be stressed and anxious, and then turn to something to help quiet the noise.
Yeah. Unfortunately for us as parents, moms and dads, the marketing and the messaging just really reinforces mommy wine juice culture. Back when my kids were young, you wouldn't see mimosas at a play group. That would have been deemed alcoholic behavior. That would have been like no-go. Now, play groups, parks, I don't fault those moms at all. But it has become so much more socially acceptable, where I think moms are just kind of like, this is hard, this is long. And then we outsource so much of our resilience to something that is, it takes the edge off, all right. It takes your edge away. That's what I've been saying, it took the edge off. It took my edge right off, to the point that I lost a lot of my presence, because I began to dull everything. As Brené Brown famously says, you can't selectively numb. And so while I was numbing the chaos, the conflict, all of it, and the height of my drinking was really in those preteen and first several years of teenager. So I'm glad you worked this out now, Jesse. So glad you're on the path to working this out. I was really just kicking it up and getting started with the ages of your kids, is really when I noticed drinking it all started so simple. Like you said, on the weekends, I've been with the kids all day. I'm going to be with my man tonight. Adults drink adult drinks. I'm out on the town. I mean, we got a babysitter. But for me, I think a lot of parents don't talk about the challenges of littles, of young ones, and the constant physical demand. And then I don't think enough moms, which I'm certainly out there to talk about what it's like to raise teenagers, just the rejection that you feel as a mom. All these littles that think you're, king and your wife's queen right now, and y'all are it. And like everything kind of revolves around whatever y'all are saying and doing. I mean, they're pushing back a little bit. But when you start to get into those preteen years, that 13, 14, 15, where your kids all of a sudden shut you out, they aren't talking to you, it's normal, but it still hurts. And I don't think I was prepared for that. And so I would just swallow that down, take the high road. Why? Because I'm the mom, I'm the adult here. I think I was drinking that down because I felt embarrassed that I was feeling rejected from my kids. And now I don't. They're in their 20s. They're awesome. We have an adult friendship now. But I wish somebody would have said that out loud. I didn't know that would hurt so bad.
No, we had a milestone moment the other day. Usually when I make my kids like a shake, like a healthy shake, the blender's really loud. So just to make it fun, every time I like press start on the blender, I'll do like a silly dance just so they're like laughing and stuff.
Oh, right.
The other day I turned on the blender and I did my silly dance, which normally like my oldest daughter, the first grader, would love. She literally said, "Daddy, stop. That's corny." And like, I was like, oh my God, it's happening. I looked at my wife. I was like, it's happening. It's happening. First grade. It's happening. Darn it. Hey, somewhat of a pivot here. I want to talk about the role that faith, the faith that can play in this whole journey. But before I do, I just want to get your gears grinding on that. I just want to ask one more question about your story. So when you made that decision that, by the time you're 50, you kind of want to, be a different person, reinvent yourself. What are some of the first steps that you took? Like when you initially made that decision to start tipping over that first domino of alcohol, what are some kind of practical things that you would offer to my audience if they want to move in that direction as well? One
of the things that I tried for years that got me nowhere was just willpower alone. I think willpower is important because you got to have a little bit of grit to have the commitment follow through. But I think willingness, I think I was willing. I was so willing. I always say to the women I work with, pick your hard, because I was uncomfortable and things were hard when I was drinking. I think sometimes it's easy to romanticize. Oh, when I was drinking, everything was great. Now it's just going to be so hard. No, things were actually hard when I was drinking, but I wasn't moving the needle. I wasn't getting anywhere I really wanted to go. So I started to become, just my overall mindset shift became willingness more than willpower, and less about performance, behavior modification, checking boxes. I was already doing that. I was already good at that daytime, but trying to transfer that with willpower to evening, I didn't have it. I ran out of gas. Decision fatigue would set in. So some of the practical things that I did early on, I talk a lot about the 3 Ps. And I feel like that fits here. So practically speaking, when it came time for a social event, and I'm a very social person. My husband owns a real estate company. So there's all kinds of networking in that industry. There's just book clubs. There's just a million and one ways to practice these 3 Ps. And I think I went into it with the willingness to practice instead of the performance and the perfectionism to get it right. And all of a sudden, like behavior modification and stiff armness, because I'd already tried that and it didn't work. It could get me so far. Then I would slip. And when I would slip, I would just slide. This sucks. I can't do it. I'm just, wheels off. It almost made me drink more every time I tried not to drink with more of that intensity. So instead, I just relaxed. And I was like, I'm just going to practice through willingness and seeing if I can create new experiences for myself without alcohol. I've certainly created enough with it. But I would say starting more with a willingness and a curiosity will get you further than a hardcore. Tony Robbins, I think he talks a lot about National Quitters Day, and this podcast may air right around there. It's usually the second Friday of January that most people throw in the towel. So much on their new resolutions and I'm going to just do better. I'm not going to drink again. I'm not going to smoke again. I'm not going to watch this again, whatever. Most people last 14 to 17 days with that kind of resolute willpower, but without usually community, without connection, without practical tools. So I think that's one thing I did early on was think, how can I create a lifestyle that's actually sustainable? Because I can do Whole30. I can take breaks. I can do a juice cleanse.
Yeah.
I can do all that. And that's not creating a lifestyle that is checking boxes. I want a lifestyle where it's not boxes. And so the 3 Ps, just in short, are pre-decide, pre-plan, and play the movie forward. So those are some practical Ps there. I love those 3 Ps. First one's pre-decide. You can't get to a party. You can't show up in your kitchen at 5 o'clock if you haven't pre-decided what you're going to do in a situation where you had lived on autopilot like I was living on autopilot. So if I didn't pre-decide, if I was just going to kind of play it by ear or get to the party and kind of see what everyone else was ordering, I'm toast. I'm done. The current is so strong that if I don't pre-decide, not saying never forever, but like tonight, I am not drinking before I go. And then also pre-planning. You can't just take something like alcohol out and leave a void. I'm convinced of that. I think,
Amen.
Yeah, you can't just, it's there for a reason. It's a placeholder for something. You're looking for anxiety relief, to unwind, to transition, to socialize, to connect. We're all doing what we do for a reason. So find out what that reason is and pick a different alternative in that place. So for me, I really started investigating and learning about all the alcohol-free options out there. Oh my gosh, the world opened up to me. All of a sudden, if I were just drinking for taste and not the buzz of the ethanol, I had options. So I started pre-deciding and then pre-planning. So if that's a BYOB, if that's having something in my fridge that I can instantly go to so I don't feel deprived, it's not a deprivation mindset. And then my most critical tool is playing the movie forward. How do I want to feel later? Not just how do I want to feel in this moment, but when you play the movie forward, how do you feel 3 hours later? Are you still chasing the buzz? How many have you had to have where you just finally call it quits until I'm never doing that again?
Yeah.
Happens again.
Yeah. How's it feel at 11 p.m. when you're alone on the couch watching UFC, and then your kids wake you up at 6, and the last thing you want to do is drag yourself out of bed, and you do that on repeat every Saturday for better parts of a year. Yeah.
Sounds
Play
like
that forward.
You can relate.
Yeah.
Well, the 3 a.m. wake up call where you're laying there and you're like, you kind of wake up, a little bit of a racing heartbeat, dry mouth, the headache starts, and you're laying there in pitch black darkness, and you're like, oh no.
Damn it. I did it again.
Did it again. Yep. I did it again. I didn't mean to. It was just going to be one more. I was watching Netflix or whatever. Just one more, just kind of chasing something elusive that is uncatchable. And
well
then
said.
the next morning, I'm like, penance, do it all over again. Detox-to-Retox. I got to get in yoga. I got to start green juicing, hoping to somewhat break even. So playing the movie forward, I plan my Friday nights now, Jesse, based on the Saturday morning I want to have. In fact, the more science I've learned, I plan my Monday morning and my Friday night. They correlate. I didn't know that my cortisol levels were rising for days after drinking. I'm like, what a ripoff. I mean, if you tied one on the weekend, you're paying for it on Wednesday. No wonder you want to drink again on Thursday. So playing the movie forward is a very practical tool. You can go either way with that too, playing it like the way you want it to be or the way you know it's going to be if you get started.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes from Paris Island. I was in the Marines, and one of the drill instructors said it. He said it one time. It always sticks with me. But it's fail to plan, plan to fail. Right? Love that. I pull it out all the time. People are sick of hearing it around me. So much good stuff. One of the things you said there, I just want to repeat for the sake of repeating it. But chasing something elusive. That is such an accurate, I think, compelling way to think about why we overindulge when we're drinking alcohol, because you're just after this feeling, whether it's nostalgic euphoria, whether it's just like this complete, it could be even a distorted way to seek presence. And by that, I mean, like, what you're looking for is contentment. Like, this is it, right? And if I just have another drink, eventually I'll feel like I got what I wanted. But the elusive part of it is exactly right, because seldom, if ever, do you actually feel that contentment or that extreme euphoria that you're looking for.
Ever.
Right?
In fact, it's diminishing marginal returns. I was a business major, so I'd pull in a business term. But seriously, it has one of those effects where it's only going to be as good as you hope it is at the beginning. And that's the trick. That's, to me, the lure. It's that initial, my shoulders just went down, I can do a neck roll feeling that you get initially. And it's because of what the value we give to alcohol, not only was what it's doing for us physiologically, but the value I assigned to alcohol was so high. I was getting a dopamine hit just reaching for the glass. And so just assigning different value to it and looking at it for what it really is helped me devalue it. And that was part of my road to freedom, was devaluing alcohol to the point that now it has no value to me.
You see it for what it is.
It takes, it doesn't give.
Yeah, love it. Takes, doesn't give. Look, for some reason, when it comes to mental health and recovery from alcohol misuse, people don't talk about supplements enough. When I decided to step away from alcohol and rebuild my health, I quickly learned that nutrition and supplementation weren't just optional, they're essential. That's why I choose Momentous supplements. Look, for me, the goal has always been about health span, living better for longer. And when it comes to supplements for high performers, nobody does it like Momentous. Momentous invests heavily in NSF certification, meaning every batch of their products is tested for heavy metals, harmful additives, and label claim accuracy. You gotta know what you're putting in your body. And that's why Momentous is trusted by all 32 professional NFL teams and D1 collegiate sports team dietitians across the country. And look, Momentous doesn't offer every supplement under the sun. Other brands can do that just fine. Instead, Momentous nails the basics with bone-crushing consistency to help you build the perfect and intentional routine for you. And when we talk about basics, what are we talking about? What do I take? I take their protein and their creatine. Momentous protein is best in class for muscle repair and growth, while their CreaPure creatine, the purest form of creatine monohydrate, supports both physical strength and cognitive performance. These are foundational supplements that I continue to use to this day in my health journey for physical strength, mental fitness, and emotional resilience. So whether you're taking your first step or your next step in your fitness journey, these supplements are the building blocks of living better longer. Go to livemomentous.com and try it today at 20% off with code STRENGTH. That's livemomentous.com, 20% off with code STRENGTH, and start living on purpose today. Let's talk about faith. I know what you and I have in common, just in the lead up to this episode, is that we believe in Jesus. I want to start this conversation by saying we're going to talk about faith, right? And we are going to look at it through the lens of Jesus here. But of course, faith has amazing usefulness and utility, regardless of which particular faith you follow, right? So that is a preface to ask. So I want to ask you, what role has faith played in your own kind of spiritual, emotional, physical, mental health? And how can, and maybe like specifically, how can people who have faith, or at least a curiosity about it, how might they lean into their faith if they're looking to make a change in their life?
Yeah, I love this. And thank you for the opportunity. I think it's such an important component of wholehearted living to talk about mind, body, and spirit. People are pretty comfortable talking about mind and mindset, and people are real comfortable talking about body and science and, even sugar. People love to talk about sugar when I start talking about alcohol. But I think the faith component, I think the spiritual component is a huge component. For me, it's the base. It's the complete foundation of my identity. My identity comes from my faith in the way that I have an identity through my relationship with Jesus Christ. And so for me, it's not really about religion. It's about relationship, and it's about identity. And that's part of why I had such a divided mind with the drinking aspect of my life, is because I was literally, like I said earlier, trying to chase two rabbits and couldn't catch one. Well, I was also trying to serve two masters and was very discontent. One thing I will say, as I just continue to grow in my faith, is really recognizing and knowing and understanding more and more. I don't think I'll ever attain it. I don't think I'll ever grasp it. The nature of the heart of Christ, the nature of his heart towards us is so good. I'm reading a book right now by Dane Ortland called Gentle and Lowly. Shout out. It's so good. It's talking about the nature of God's heart. And it's not to punish us. It's not to take away things that are fun. I think knowing his heart for us is always good, that he wants the best for us. That it's not from a place of judgment, rules. I grew up in a church home. I think that's super fortunate, but I also think with that can become a little bit of almost an immunity to the amazing scandalous grace that's out there, that's available. And so for me, faith is an identity piece that lets me know who I am because of whose I am. That's a big part of my being. And also with the aspect of drinking and it just not aligning. There's a scripture in Romans that talks about, Paul's talking about, why do I do the frustration of why do I do the very things that I do not want to do? And I felt that way often. I don't want to drink, and I do. I want to drink less, and I want to drink more. I don't know what to do with this cognitive dissonance inside. And I think leaning into my faith allowed me to see God actually wasn't trying to stand over here and say, get it together, Jenn, and then come back over. But what I want your listeners to hear, and want to hear if you've experienced this, is what I felt the Lord say to me, just spirit to spirit. And my spirit was, Jenn, I want to partner with you on this. I don't want you to clean it up, get it together, and then come all shiny and then you're in my good graces. Jesse, I used to pray on my back patio, God, take this away. Take this desire away. Take this away. Take this actual drink away. While I was holding on to the wine stem very tightly, and I was not fully surrendered. I was asking him to take it away, but I was not partnering with him to get it to him. in my heart of hearts. I was cognitively, I wanted to do that, but I wasn't willing. I wasn't ready to do that. And when this change was happening in my heart and in my mind in 2017, that's when I really felt this shift of, let's do this together. It's not going to be all you, and it's not going to be all me. I didn't feel like God was going to swoop in or like a genie in a bottle, or just like all of a sudden just boop, take this desire away. I was going to need to partner with him to do the work, but I was also going to need to partner with him to trust him, to surrender to him, that he could sustain me where I had allowed alcohol to fit that space. And so for me, it was identity and partnership.
I love that. Yeah, so my story as it relates to faith, and particularly in, we'll connect it to mental health. It's this. So I actually became a believer at 29, and again I'm 40, right? So yeah, and my wife had a big role in that. But the role that my faith and my belief played in my recovery, and I'm a work in progress, right? I mean, I think we all are. Is this right? It's like if you truly follow Jesus and the teachings of Jesus and Christianity and the Bible, you know that you are good, and you are good just as you are, and you also know that God has prepared a place for you. It's called heaven, and that your time on earth is temporary. But if we just reflect back, even in this discussion, to the life that I was living in my mid-30s to late 30s, where I was constantly pushing and thriving and driving my own car, and I felt like I had complete agency, and the outcome of my life was left to me. What I had to learn and discover the hard way is, underneath everything, insidiously and subconsciously, is there was a fear. There was a deep fear that was created throughout my life, particularly my early life, where I was afraid that if I didn't work every day and be as efficient as I possibly could and make all the right decisions, that I was going to be a failure. Inevitably, because I've lost some really close people in my life under some tragic circumstances, and I think it kind of changed my worldview to one of like fear. And I realized the fragility and how fleeting this life is. And part of what was driving me to work so hard and wake up early and lift and check all the boxes and do all the emails and outperform was because I felt like I had to, because if I didn't, I would fail and something bad would happen to me. I would be exposed as just weak and inferior. So there was all of this fear that was in direct contradiction of what the gospel teaches us about what happens when you accept Jesus into your heart, which is that you can feel safe and you can feel protected. And yes, you still have agency, you still have to work hard and be responsible, but you don't have to be afraid, because regardless of what happens here, I will be okay. I will be in heaven. My family will too, Lord willing, if I raise them right. So what I realized, and by the way, alongside therapy, is despite the fact that consciously, as you put it, I was believing and saying, "Oh, I'm Jesus is Lord. I love you. I'm okay. I'm saved." All these things. I certainly wasn't acting like it. And I was still stressed, and I was still anxious and tense, because I was just fighting and thriving for an outcome that has already been provided to me. So what I had to learn, and I'm still trying to practice, is when things feel hard, when things feel chaotic, as you said earlier, when things feel tough or out of my control, I have to kind of retreat back to a place where I can't control everything, but I believe that my Lord and Savior has already protected me and my family, right? And I think if you can build in practical disciplines like spending some time reading the Bible every day, it doesn't have to be, an hour, it can be 5 minutes, or just maybe when you're washing your hands, because you have to do that, instead of singing happy birthday, you just say a quick prayer. Like, if you can build in these little reminders, it just kind of calms my spirit a little bit. And then over time, I don't have that sense of like urgency and that tenseness that I bring to life because of that fear. And I know that was a speech, but like faith, and like for me, I had to kind of really sit down with a therapist and kind of unpack what are you afraid of, really?
Right. What's
I think
driving this performance so much so that you want to numb out because it's so
exactly
intense. Yeah,
exactly. You nailed it.
I love your story of coming to know Christ at a little bit later age, and just the authenticity of your life change, your heart change, and then I think you've really pinpointed something for both of us as Christians, as already Christ followers, we struggled with alcohol on that side, right? Of accepting Christ's free gift to us. And so I think that's so important because I don't know about you, but I didn't feel safe, comfortable to talk about my struggle with drinking, primarily in Christian circles like a church, a small group, a Bible study, because of the judgment, the shame, my own shame, being shamed, the labels, the strong sense of labeling. The fact that if you're talking about alcohol, you must have a big problem, and people only knew one label to use. If you're struggling with alcohol, you must be an alcoholic. And I don't believe that's true. I think the science now shows that there is a full drinking spectrum, but like people aren't educated enough to know that per se. Or by us sharing, we're mirroring, we're like walking pieces of glass, like mirror, where we're showing other people maybe something in their life that they may or may not be ready to look at. So by us even bringing up a topic like over drinking or drinking for the wrong reasons, it pricks something in them that they're like, oh, quick label, oh, something's wrong with you. When really it would be such an amazing dialogue to go, you know what? Kind of me too. Let's figure this out. Let's talk about it, because that's what I was lacking the most in those years of silent suffering, was thinking I was the only one. I was broken. Something's wrong with me. I just need to try harder, which only fed my perfectionism, high drive, need to check out until I couldn't take it anymore. Or I made it so socially acceptable. It didn't look so desperate as I'm making it sound. It was actually celebrated.
Yeah, amen. And look, you're saying it so beautifully. I mean, it's exactly why I did what I did. I quit that job that was driving me to drink. I was like hiding. I mean, I went from like literally drinking an extra beer or two in my garage with no one knowing to quitting my job. Like, I'm starting a podcast, because if I'm hiding it, if I'm ashamed of it, if I'm afraid for people to know, then there's a lot more people like me, and I'm just going to sprint headfirst towards telling everyone that, like, hey, life can be hard and we all struggle and we all need to be honest, because this alcohol thing.
And not to put myself on any kind of pedestal or high horse, but if I'm struggling, I know other people are struggling.
Yep.
Because I grew up with a relatively, I mean, I think we all have little T trauma, but I grew up in a really loving home with great guidance, and I fell straight into the pitcher plant. It took me a minute to get there, but boy, once I fell in, the pitcher plant, as Alan Carr talks about, I mean, I was in, and I was like, what's wrong with me? What is this? It was foreign to me so much, quote, later in life, because I grew up with a lot of rules around a lot of things. I was a rule follower. So what are the rules? Tell me. We're all playing a game here. What are the rules of this game? And I'm not even playing to win. I'm just playing to not stand out or lose. That was kind of my MO younger. So the rules around drinking when I was younger was, don't drink if you're not 21. Got it. No problem. I'll follow that rule. And again, you're
not me.
Sounds like 19 was your peak.
Oh, I was standing outside a liquor store asking strangers to buy me a 30 pack at 15. But go ahead.
Not me. I'm carrying my Trapper Keeper, my little notebook. I'm a total nerd. I admit it.
Love it.
I mean, look at me now. I was a total nerd then. I may be a nerd now. I don't know. I don't care. I'm in my 50s, so it doesn't matter anymore what people think. So they say. Yeah. And if you can't see me right now, people, just know I'm wearing a sweater with 25 patches on it, and we'll leave it at that. But so the rules were, don't drink if you're not 21, don't drink and drive. That's like a state of Texas law. That's the big boss. They'll really get you. And as a Christian growing up in a Christian home, don't drink to get drunk. I did not grow up thinking drinking itself was a sin. I still don't think it is. I grew up with the wine as a mocker. Okay, what does that mean? Well, I know now. Wine has certainly mocked me. But I didn't really get that growing up. I was like, but Jesus drank wine. I was confused, but I just knew, don't get drunk with wine, because that's a waste. That's dissipation. That's a waste. Be filled with the Holy Spirit instead. Now that makes a lot more sense to me. But back then, I'm just like, those are the 3 rules around drinking. Got it. And those rules carried me pretty long. I got married young. My husband was 22, and I was 24 when we got married. We started cranking out our kiddos in my 20s. So I got married and had 2 kids and built a business. Our first business, we're entrepreneurs. I built a business. We had a retail business all in my 20s. So if I hadn't been drinking In high school, I was in a sorority. In college, I went to a state school, totally active in my sorority. And quite honestly, for me, just my personality, just who I am, it was actually sobering for me, if I use that word here, to go to a frat party with my sorority sisters and watch. And again, to date myself, this is in the, late 80s, early 90s, pre-Uber, pre-cell phone. It was dangerous. To get drunk at a frat party, you're stuck. I mean, good luck with that. I don't know how you're getting out of there. So for me, in my rule following, it's, literally stay safe. And that's why it snuck up on me in my young 30s. I'm not breaking any of the rules. I'm 31. I'm not drinking and driving because now everyone's drinking when they go out. So I guess everyone's somewhat drinking and driving, unless they Uber, which is now a thing. But like I'd ridden with my friend to my first networking happy hour where I really had my first drink that stood out to me. And I didn't drink the first time to get drunk. I mean, it didn't take much to affect me.
Yeah. I love that on the surface, we're opposites in a lot of ways, but we find ourselves in the exact same place. And I think that's beautiful. I have one more question for you. And by the way, this conversation's just been so amazing. Thanks for joining the show. I always love to have my audience know what you're up to and what you're excited about. I know you had a book come out in 2023, it was. Tell us about the book and tell us about anything else that you're excited about as you look at 2025 and then where people can easily find and follow you.
I think you'll really appreciate the title of my book out there. Based on our conversation here, it's called Look Alive. Look Alive, Sis. And that comes from this whole premise of look alive in your own life. When I was writing this book and coming up with the title, the people I was working with were like, what are some mantras that you say a lot? And I'm like, keep going and growing, look alive. And they're like, whoa, there's one. I'm like, yeah, look alive. It's a 40-day reader. It's Look Alive, Sis, 40 days to awaken your sober mind. So it's not a biography. It's not a page, it's not a cover to cover, sit down in one reading. Although it is a light read, I will admit, I don't think it's the book I have inside that's like the book of books. It is more of a book for women and men, but definitely for women who are sober curious, who want to just maybe kind of get in the mind of someone who is wanting to create more sober-mindedness and how drinking fits into that. And because we're talking about the faith piece, just in case any of your listeners or yourself are familiar with YouVersion, it's a free Bible app that you can put on your phone. It's an awesome resource. I would highly recommend YouVersion to anyone who's spiritually curious. Like Jesse and I have talked about, maybe you're sober curious, but you may be spiritually curious too while you're listening to this. And so I actually had 2 plans on YouVersion. I have a 3-day plan and a 7-day plan, all along the vein of what we're talking about, just how to be awake in your own life, how to be sober-minded. So check out those YouVersion plans. And I think what I'm most excited about in 2025 is just the ability to do more speaking. I have an incredible sisterhood and community virtually that we really welcome women to join each and every month through a 21-day reset challenge. But my heart is really getting out there and getting live with people and bringing these stories like we've shared today to life and really interacting. So I am hoping to spread the message and the mission of this freedom and sober-minded living through more speaking. So if anybody wants me to come speak, give me a shout. And really the best place to find me, I would say, I'm really active on social media, Instagram at Sober Sis, one word, being where I probably generate the most content, and then Facebook. I'm even on TikTok. Jesse, you'll
look at you.
Proud to know I am on TikTok. But yeah, so link in bio. I'm sure you'll put some stuff here in the show notes, but would love an opportunity to just encourage women. I have all kinds of free resources just to help women with wine o'clock tonight.
I love it. And I can tell just by your advice, just getting to know you here in this last hour, that your wisdom and your guidance can serve anybody, not just women. So I will link to all of the things and all of the places. And I'll just say thank you so much for joining the Sober Strength Show. I appreciate you, Jenn.
Yeah, thank you. It was awesome.
All right. Sober Sis, everybody. Live deep. That's the show, folks. Man, what an amazing conversation. So many sound bites and quotes that, I jotted down. I mark clips as I go and things that I'm just going to take away. I mean, the idea of alcohol being the outlier. If you're and the sole outlier, if you're living a healthy, productive life and then you're just turning to alcohol, and then it being the first habit that can fall, and then all the amazing other, effects or impacts of that first domino falling, I mean, that's going to stick with me. And then just the conversation around faith and understanding how important it is to just feel safe and feel like, you don't have to strive and stress and all those things. So man, just a great conversation. And I'm so blessed to have Jenn on the show. So again, we'll link to all those resources. Please give her a follow and check her out. And you can see how her wisdom could help you. Look, I always like to ask if you could, leaving a rating review, following the show, sharing it. This whole algorithm thing, I don't quite understand it, but I know that, momentum brings momentum. And if you think this show can help other people, like maybe it helped you and even entertain, please, give us a like, follow, and share the show. We would really appreciate that. And then, as I always like to do, I'd like to send you off into the week with some encouragement. And I think this particular week, given what we just discussed with Jenn, no better way to quote from the Bible, particularly around sober-mindedness. So this is from the Bible. This is Titus 2:2, training us to renounce our ungodliness and worldly passions and to live, and here it is, guys, self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in the present age. Again, training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in the present age. It's tough out there. Information overload, overconsumption, so many things to overindulge on in this day and age. And I just caution you, do an inventory of where you spend your time, how you spend your time, what you consume, whether it's alcohol, digital, or otherwise, and just be diligent and guard your heart. So with that, I send you off. Thank you for joining the Sober Sis Show. Live deep.